Just really, really quickly, keep it brief. What is Flex, and how do you work with healthcare companies?
Well, most people knew us as Flextronics. We're now Flex, and they recognize us as a manufacturer. We're in 100 locations around the world, 200,000 employees, and so there's great scale. But about 7 years ago, the company transformed itself and added design and engineering capabilities and supply chain solutions. And that had to do with a lot of the changes we were seeing take place after the last recession, and the necessity for visibility in data and velocity. And that was offering competitive advantage for many of the brands and the companies we work with, even in healthcare.
What are some of those brands?
Johnson & Johnson, Abbott, you can imagine the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so walk me through, let's say Johnson & Johnson comes to you with an idea. Could you walk me through from the idea to the actual, device that goes into someone's body or in a hospital?
Yeah. Well,
where you're involved?
It used to be that most of the medical companies and healthcare companies would do most of the R&D within their own company, their own department. And what we're seeing now is product life cycles shrinking. The innovation cycles are happening much faster. And so they're now recognizing that they can't go at this alone. So the idea of just coming and bringing their idea and IP and saying, okay, now try to help us make this, has changed. So what most of them understand is there's tremendous pressure right now, cost pressures in healthcare, and they're realizing that they have to find partners, especially those that are looking for connected devices, to try to manage and design and engineer the costs down, which is not very typical of the medical field. And so what they'll do is they'll come to us and they'll say, we have this idea, we have a current product, whether it be something that's managing blood glucose, but we know we need to get this connected. We know we need it more real time because there's so many pressures within the healthcare industry right now around not enough practitioners for the patients. Many of the patients aren't taking their prescriptions in the proper way, if they take them at all. And that all puts a cost burden onto the whole healthcare infrastructure. So they'll say to us, help us figure this out. Help us figure out what kind of technologies can be designed into this, what kind of materials from a material science standpoint can be taken out or replaced, and how reliable it is. Because what's really interesting for us at Flex is we're in 13 industries. And so we really see all of the innovation happening the way we source innovation, right? And so we will help them build a solution. Now, in health and automotive, and we're very big, those are our fastest growing businesses. We do over $2 billion in medical alone.
$2 billion in revenue.
Yes, in revenue. You begin to look at technologies that have to be highly reliable, right? The technologies in any kind of environmental condition can't ever fail. And so we spend a lot of time working through that piece of it and the environment that these products will be used in, and do a lot of testing and certifications. And we also have, FDA regulated plants. So we really help them then quickly try to get that to market. Speed has become important. The velocity is important. Yeah. So.
What about like if you're working for it sounds like you said you're working for some of these very, very large pharmaceutical companies, medical companies. What if two are competitors? How do you reconcile that?
That's interesting. So if any of you are interested and you're in the San Jose area, we have a 1 million square foot, 12 building campus and innovation campus. But we have 23 of these around the world, but that's our largest. And each of the customers are assigned a clean room, and they're basically, it's completely contained. There's massive amounts of security to protect the IP. most of the time, my CEO, Mike, who sorry he couldn't be here, myself, our badges will not even give us access. So that's really their home away from home. And what we're finding is that this idea of co-innovation, co-development, again, for all those reasons I said earlier, is becoming more and more important. So most of the people now start to embed their design teams and engineering teams with us in these buildings. And we'll have certain engineers that are assigned to certain customers based on their needs, and they'll be then under NDA, and they'll have access to that. We have some people that come in with a black box in the middle of the night. It's like a movie, and they'll leave the next day with a prototype. We have some people that come in, are there a week, some people 3 months. Some people have come and they have never left. They've been there 3 years.
Name names. No, I'm just kidding.
So, but it is interesting because they're all from so many different industries. And what's really interesting, and this just gives you an example of what happens, is we hosted the Ford Board of Directors with the CEO, Mark Fields, at the One Innovation Center for a day. And he basically said, listen, we know automotive, we know cars, we know you guys do a lot in cars. I think we're in 420 models with semi-autonomy in vehicles today. And he said, we're not here to hear about that. What are you doing in medical? Tell us everything you see in medical. And it's this idea that many industries right now that we can see, our customers are reevaluating what business are you in, and then once you decide that, what's your business model? And many of them are moving or trying to move very rapidly into a business model, one that's sustainable but has recurring revenue. And you're going to start to hear a lot about companies in any industry who are looking for, why would I just build a product, sell it, and my relationship ends? My relationship should never end. And there's other companies coming in and offering these services and monetizing them. So,
and you're saying that medical companies have that model in place, or?
No, they have to look at that now.
Okay.
Many of them are, because as you start to think about fitness and health and medical, lines are blurring between who's going to own what piece of that market share and what product.
Well, that brings me to a good point, because I think the storyline for the past few years has been about wearables and collecting your health data, but you guys are taking a deeper bet on something else, which is drug delivery and chronic disease management. Can you share a specific example of something that you guys are working on, or sort of a prototype?
Yeah, and many of you have heard this, the subcutaneous sort of sensors for diabetes or blood glucose, and how you can begin to build products that do this in real time. I mean, right now, on average, some people only go to the doctor once a year for their annual physical. It's about how many more data points can we have that are going to inform your health, and especially with chronic disease and diabetes being one of the more expensive ones. And so can you start to get a relationship where it's real time, and one in which eventually the product is going to inform the patient as to what they should do without ever having to contact nor talk to a physician. And so we're working on a lot of these technologies. One of the biggest things actually in all of these wearables is the reliability of reading your human data, your biometrics, and that has to do with hair and moisture. And so
those are the obstacles?
Those are the obstacles, really, to the progress right now. And so there are a lot of teams in our company that are actually working on trying to find solutions to that.
Solutions to the problem of measuring things when
measuring things accurately, okay, if it's going to be diagnostic. Yeah.
Interesting. I do want to open it up for questions in just a minute, but one more question for you, which is, as Cliff mentioned, some of your biggest customers, especially on the tech and Fortune 500 side of things, Apple, Cisco, Nike. What can healthcare companies learn from some of these tech companies that you guys have worked with?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is speed. The technology cycles are moving so quickly. You have very low cost of capital. The technologies are miniaturizing to points where I could show you components that go into products where it's the size of a speck of dust. And those get implied. So everything's getting much smaller. Costs are dropping. Certainly Moore's Law has helped with that. And then cloud computing, where it's basically free computing. So competition can come from anywhere now. And some of these startups understand how to be agile enough, dynamic enough, and have the speed. And I think the healthcare and medical companies could take a lesson in speed. I also think that our regulators need to understand now the speed of technology. Because when you think about right now a product going to market in medical or healthcare, it's 3 to 10 years. You're way out of cycle on the technology, the new developments, the accuracy of those developments, the accuracy of how they're transmitting the data. All of these things keep getting refined. So whether it's the networking capabilities, the antennas, battery, one of the biggest barriers to technology adoption, as you know, is battery or power. And that's going to improve greatly. There are people working on that. So, I think speed is one thing that the industry has to sort of come to terms with.
Any questions from the audience? It looks like there's one right here. We're just going to...
You're the guy who's made my dreams come true. Because I come from the world of energy, and I just Googled your site, and I found out that you work in all kinds of things.
Yes.
Question is on accuracy. How accurate is the data that you get from these healthcare devices that you help design?
Well, and again, it would depend on whether you're talking about professional medical device or a fitness tracker, right? The devices, it's highly accurate. I mean, somebody's life's at stake. Just like in our automotive business, the sensor technologies and semi-autonomy, the computer that sits in the car. I mean, a computer's driving most of your cars today, whether you know it or not. And those have to be reliable in any condition, in any environment. And so absolutely 100%. It can't fail, especially in those industries. What I was saying earlier, I wanted to finish that thought about Mark Fields and Ford, because the reason he was interested in medical is because he recognizes that there's biometric sensors that can actually go into a car, and those sensors can read a person's biological makeup and understand whether the person is falling asleep at the wheel or not, and the car would actually respond. And there are CO2 sensors that come out of the health market that will actually, if you've left a pet or child or somebody in a car, that could actually detect that and alert you. And so he was very interested in the developments in medical. Tell me everything about medical. And then he was also very interested in what we were doing in connected home. And that was interesting to him because at some point there's going to be a platform. Many people believe it could be the Amazon Echo that becomes the platform, because he's now embedding Echo into all the Ford automobiles. But it's going to connect to your home, and then you have a connected world. And all of this is going to start to come together. And that's why I said earlier, if you're not right now, no matter what industry you're in, not thinking about what your business is and what your service is and who your competitors are and what that business model looks like, you're going to be in trouble.
Those are good parting words
yeah.
for our audience, and thank you so much.
Oh gosh.
Yes, we're up.
We're over.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leena.